Magic in the Noise to our live stream where we showcase the work of remote viewers in the community. We put the targets out publicly so anyone can submit, and then we pick usually 5 to 8 or 9 people to come join us for the live stream to share their hits, to discuss it, and that's what we're going to be doing today. And so everyone will just introduce themselves a little bit so the audience can know a little bit about who you are. If you want to say what kind of remote viewing you do, that would be fantastic. And Patrick Flanagan just stepped away for a moment, but he'll be back in a second. So we'll leave him for last, and maybe he'll be back by then. David, we'll start with you.
My name's David. Let me start over. My name is David. I'm a remote viewer. HRVG, TRV are two of the methods that I have been trained in. And I work with Sasha on Magic in the Noise. And I will pass it on to Claudia.
Hi, I'm Claudia. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm doing remote viewing now for approximately only 2 years. I joined the group and I'm very, very happy with it. At the moment, I get a training also from Sasha, and it helps a lot to make my sessions better. So I like this, yeah, very much.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, so my name is Michael. I'm from Canada. I've been doing remote viewing for about 6 or 7 months now, and mostly just through freeform learning and just learning from the others around me here. And these have been really great educational sessions for me to kind of improve my own skills there. I'll pass it on to Chris now.
Hey everyone, my name is Chris, Chilio on YouTube. So I've been doing remote viewing since 2020, 2021, somewhere there. I've been doing mostly CRV and HRVG, and I just started the training with Sasha on the full spectrum remote viewing methodology, and I'm really liking it so far.
My name is John, and I've been practicing CRV for roughly 3 years, and I've been training under Lori Williams. I'm from Iowa in the United States, and yeah.
And Danielle?
Yes, I'm new. I'm a spontaneous viewer. This is my first time with remote viewing. I don't know what it will have given because Sasha has kept the answers for her so far. So I'm eager to hear that, if I missed everything or not. Thank you.
Thank you. And Patrick?
You're on mute.
Patrick, you're muted.
Yeah, still
muted.
Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Flanagan. I'm based in Galway in Ireland. I use a combination of TRV and HRVG, and I've been involved in remote viewing about 7 years. So that's a little bit of my background.
Thank you. And finally, I'm Sasha. I am co-founder of Magic in the Noise with David, and I've been trained in CRV, I've been trained in HRVG, a touch of ERV in there somewhere, and now I've developed my own system, which is full spectrum illumination, which is a remote viewing system. Right now, Chris and Claudia are my students, and I'll be opening it up for a new cohort later, maybe September, October, sometime in there. And so Today, one of the things we're going to talk about before we launch into the full data, I want to talk a little bit about retasking and precision retasking in particular. So in order to show what I'm talking about, I'm going to be using some of the data from the submitters here today. So Chris and Claudia and Jeff as well, I think. And so let's take a look at those slides. And sometimes I struggle with sharing my screen, but I think this time I have it down. So we can all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So the target this week that we're discussing is the LongYou caves in China. These are quite mysterious because they're enormous. There's an enormous number of these caves. The amount of dirt that's been removed is shocking, and there's no explanation for where it went because they don't find mounds of earth elsewhere around the caves to explain where all the displaced earth has gone. They don't understand how it was constructed. There are these ridges on all the walls, the ceilings, the pillars, and they don't know why those ridges are there. They look like they were handmade because of the irregular aspect to the regularity of them. The ceiling of these caves are at a sharp 45-degree angle. So all in all, very mysterious, very ancient. They didn't find any depictions on the walls when they first found them. And in recent years, they've added art to the walls as it's become more of a tourist attraction. So I'm going to give you more feedback as we look at the data that the viewers have presented. And so we'll just start with this basic feedback. And so before we get into that data, we're looking at blind retasking. And so this is something that's important, we think, at MINT, for the community of remote viewing, that when you keep the remote viewer blind, you better trust that the data is uncorrupted by their own expectations, their prior knowledge, sometimes their biases. It's better to be blind, even if you think you have extreme control over your prejudices or your biases. Sometimes it's not even a conscious distortion. Sometimes that distortion just happens subconsciously because you think, okay, this is what the data is, so this maybe would make sense as the data. And this data, that doesn't really make sense with what the target is. So I'm not going to investigate that. I'm not going to go further into that. And so instead of relying on that inner voice that tells you, oh, this is important, you should collect more data about this, you're making rational decisions. And so it really does corrupt your session. And we don't feel there's any need, not just for front loading, but we don't feel there's any need for mid loading. If you are retasking your remote viewer, or if you're having them do 2 sessions and you give them the first session and then now they're going to start their second session, we don't feel that there's any need to unblind them in any way in between those, even if it's just to tell them it's an event, or tell me more about the person, or tell me more about this thing that you drew on page 7 of your session. We don't see a need for any of that. We've been testing blind retasking for the last year and a half, actually, and it's successful. It works. And I'm going to show you data today that proves that it doesn't just work for David and I or the members of our Special 5 group that we were working in last spring. It works for all remote viewers. I think the better the remote viewer, the more precisely they can hone in on the blind retasking. And so the point that I want to make is, if you're not getting the specificity that you want from a retasked remote viewer, or a remote viewer who's working his second and final session, because we don't believe in doing 8, 9, 10 sessions for a target. We feel like you should be able to get it within your 2 sessions, maybe a retask. You need either the tasker has to learn to make his taskings more shiny, so help the remote viewer get to the target by having the tasker put extra effort into making it shiny. And that's something that maybe we'll talk about another day on how to do that. Or you need the remote viewer to do more training or more practice to improve his or her ability, so that they can focus their attention on the tasking rather than going to what their point of interest is for a retask. So those are both trainable things. So here's an example of our data from this week. I had tasked Claudia with the LongYou caves, and this is one of the drawings, the sketches that she had in her session. So to retask her, I created this target, which was just a screen capture that I took from her session. And then I tasked her with, please provide more data on this structure, what it looks like inside, and who built it. And can we move to the next slide? Yes. And the page 1 of her retask is a cave that's hidden. There's this light around it. There's reflection of shadows on stone walls. And there's these there's these rituals. And so that's the first page of her retask. So I asked her to tell me about this cave entrance. She tells me about the cave on her first page of data. And then the fire, the light coming from the fire right now, if you visit the caves, you'll see that they've been set up to really bring out this kind of orange glow. And so I think that that's what Claudia was picking up on. And these caves, when they were initially discovered, they were deep underwater, they were flooded. And so that's, I think, some of the green and some of the, you'll see later more data that supports that. Here is Claudia's 4th page of her retask, but it's the 3rd element that she's describing. So she described 3 elements. One of her elements was on 2 pages. So this is the 3rd element. And it's good data. I think it's these pillars. I can see the reflection in it. There's the tourists around it, or maybe the people that were around it when it was initially built. I think that's amazing data. And that's on her retask. And it answers my retasking question to tell me what's inside the cave. So there's no need to unblind her. There was no need to tell her explicitly, Claudia, please tell me about this drawing that you did in your session. There's no need for that. All I did was I gave her a new target code and said, here's your retask target code. And she brought back the data. This again is more data from her retask session. She has these stairs, stone steps inside a mountain, a long way to the ground level. And that's actually good data. It's below ground, but it's still the same principle. And these caves are so deep that when you're in them and you're on the bottom, you are essentially in a mountain of rock. And I think the element of the zigzagginess is perfect for the steps, the detailing that you can see in the walls, as well as just the grooves in the walls. So here is her summary for the retask. She had the feeling this target was about finding a thing in a cave, something underground where things are being done which are not so positive. That is her summary, and that exactly answers the retask question. So I'm going to, Claudia, did you want to say a few words about this?
Yeah. Well, I'm pleasantly surprised because, of course, I did not know this precisely. Yes, what can I say? It was really, I saw the flickering light on stones. So, but I had a bit of a negative feeling around it. But also, yeah, I saw clearly the mountain and all the steps down, but it felt empty. It felt a bit threatened also, as if people sometimes were locked up there. So something like that. So,
yeah, so that was amazing. It was really incredible to see that in the retask. And you can see how specifically you were answering the retask tasking only by being given the new target code. So I think that's amazing. So good work.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. And Sasha and I have seen this a bunch of times, and it's just, I mean, it logically follows the patterns that we've seen in the community with doing different types of activities with remote viewing. So it's not intellectually necessarily shocking, but when you actually see it happen again and again, the level of precision where a person just goes from this broader scope right down into where you're asking them, okay, now dig into this piece here. It's just wild. And this is where being far more strategic in the community in terms of how you approach and solve problems, I believe is one of the failings of the community in general, is that there needs to be a more strategic approach to these sorts of things. And then you could take large groups of people and bring it down to, an individual or small groups that are very optimized. It's just there's broader discussions on this sort of thing. I'm not saying what people out there are doing is wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's just more about broadening your thinking and having more of the knowledge of how these types of things actually work under the hood, the mechanics, and applying them. So, anyways, fantastic job, Claudia. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's trusting your viewers, right? And trusting the tasker. And I think when you start trusting your viewers, they'll perform to the challenges that you set for them. So that was really good. And so I'm going to now put my share screen back up. There we go. And so the next few people, I gave them this retask of describe the builders of the LongYou caves in China and explain why they built the LongYou caves. And so here we have Chris, page 1 of his retask. He gives me this fountain-like thing. Now, I worked this target a year ago. I had the exact same fountain and it just looks exactly as though you took it from my my session. It's so close. And so it was nice to see that. But this idea of something that's running on autopilot, that's flowing, and then here you have the lungs and you have this breathing organ life surviving. And I thought, we know that this was an underground place that was built, and it looks like it might have been related to some kind of catastrophic event that they were trying to protect themselves from. And so I think that's really good data. And in terms of why it was built, the idea that it was built because they needed to protect themselves from maybe some kind of a catastrophe above the surface of the earth that made maybe the air less breathable or toxic. I think you're answering exactly the task, which is why did they build it? And then here it's on your page 2 of your retask, Chris, you're answering my question of describing the builders of the LongYou caves. And so you're giving me this person, and yeah, you picked up on this insect fly thing, and I'll show you in a minute why that's relevant and good data. But again, asking why, to live better, longer, healthier, and how, filtration. And so filtering the air, I think that matches with this data, and it matches with the caves themselves. And so I think the builders, that they're something like a druid, ancient, mysterious, magical. That's fantastic data. And why they built it to restore health. Again, you're honing in extremely precisely to answer my tasking. I was really impressed with that. And so here we see the insect fly. You're trying to figure out what that is. And I looked up ancient Chinese hats, and this is what I found from the Ming Dynasty. And I actually think that matches really well with what you're trying to communicate here. So I thought that was fantastic data. Yeah, and so Chris, I'll let you say something about that if you want to.
Yeah, the insect was weird, so it could make sense. I was just seeing something weird like that with eyes all over the place. But yeah, I really had this feeling of breathing in, breathing out, this movement of in and out, and of something flowing. But this breathing thing was all over the session.
And so from what I'm gathering, both from your data and from the research that I did, I'm wondering if there was something wrong with the air, some event, I'm not sure what, but something happens, maybe the air becomes a little bit toxic, and maybe illness as well, because a few of you picked up on biological elements. And so that idea of, I kind of thought of smallpox when I saw the face that you drew with all the little bubbles on his face, right? You took them as eyes, but I thought, if the air goes toxic, if there's some meteor that crashes and everything is dust in the air, and then people get diseased because their immune system is so weak, that would maybe fit really well with not just your data, but some of the other people's data as well. So I thought that was interesting. And that idea of they built these caves, and we'll see this in a few slides, on these aquifers. And so there's constantly water running through and around the caves, and that kept the air fresh and it kept the air from stagnating. And so it's really fascinating data. So yeah, so good job on that. And again, I think just proves the effect. Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
David.
great job, Chris. Yeah, great job, Chris. Amazing to see your data, what you've collected, and again, how it relates to her blind retask. I just, because you said the water and the health part, I believe negative ions come off of water. Is that right? Especially moving water. So, and they're shown to have a positive effect on health. So, yeah, anyways, it's just fascinating.
That's a good point to make. Yeah, that's true. Okay, and so then moving on, then we have Jeff, who unfortunately can't be with us today, but he'll be here for our next one. And for him as well, I gave him the same retasking, describe the builders and explain why they built the caves. And Jeff comes back with such a great sketch. He's showing the sunlight coming in at the top, and we see that exactly in the LongYou caves. And then he has this kind of vestibule space, and some of the caves do have that. And then the jagged stairs that go underground where it's cool. And you can see these jagged squares along the wall where people walk down into the cool lower spaces. So I think that's a perfect sketch in response to the retask. And he tells us why they built it. Isolation, it's a terrarium, biodome, greenhouse. So again, if there's something wrong at the surface, the air isn't safe, or there's illness, so people go down into this terrarium to isolate themselves to stay safe. And also this idea of some sort of an experiment, contained experiment. And that kind of makes sense too, because it's something maybe that they were just hoping, hopefully we'll survive down here. We don't really know, but this they're our only option. So I thought that was amazing from Jeff as well. You can see here the steps along the wall, the jagged edges, and that really, I think it just matches his data so well. I was so surprised and pleased and delighted to see the magic here. And yeah, so just a quick note. So Chris and Claudia used my full spectrum illumination remote viewing system for their sessions. So I'm very happy to see their good work, obviously. Teehee. And so let's start with the broader group describing the physical attributes of the caves. This is kind of what they look like. The lights are creating this golden orange glow, but the raw structure is beige and sandstone. So here we have John. Do you want to say something about your data here?
Yeah, I had this impression of like, I don't know if it was maybe just how it was being constructed at the time, but it was a lot of like outward push of mass, and definitely like being at a different level in the center than its surrounding environment.
Yeah, I think that was really, really good data. And Patrick, do you want to say something about this shape as well? Because I actually think that there is a lot of, it's a good corroboration, I think, for what John is presenting.
Yeah, it makes a bit of sense there now, because I was kind of wondering what that was. Now, when I see the inside of the cave, it was just, again, it was kind of confusing as to, was I leaning more towards the AOL, but it was definitely inside. I felt inside. It felt very, very smooth and curved. But again, very unusually, it still had that kind of protective feel, and kind of cushioned or protected from something, So even though it looks quite rugged there in the actual images, it makes me wonder so much about what that was actually used for, because I do have a feeling that there was something connected with health in there. Because that kind of came to me a number of times in the 2 sessions that I done.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I saw that. I think that was interesting as well. And it just gives us some hints, that corroboration. So I just did like that you both had the same kind of underlying motif, and the zigzaggy, the stairs, and then also that moving outwards in John's. So that was good data. And then here, Danielle tells us it's a man-made stone walls tunnel leading to a beige sandstone area, and she has the sense of an earth mound. And I thought that was wonderful data, because the LongYou caves are actually sandstone, and they are these stone tunnels that lead to this beige underground. So that was amazing data, Danielle. And here as well, so we have more of your data here, man-made stone walls. You did have this idea that there are no inscriptions on the walls. And that was really good, is that nothing else on the floor or on the walls. And that was good data. And it was one of the things that's so mysterious about the LongYou caves, was that there was no inscriptions. There's no really sense of artistic impressions. And like I said, the ones that they have now have been added recently just for tourism. So Danielle, if you wanted to say something about that, because your impressions came through, it seems very much as a download. I'll unmute you on my end. There you go. Oh, no.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay. My impression was that it was man-made sandstone, and we had to climb stairs to go to the main chamber, and there was no lightning. There was no meaning of lightning the room.
Yes.
And I saw a sarcophagus. See, I can't see that on the pictures, but they may be elsewhere. It may be elsewhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
And there was, in my view, there was no water around in this chamber.
In this chamber, yes. And the sarcophagus, so we don't know everything that the Chinese government found. We only know what they report to have found, right?
Okay, because there was something important. Someone was buried there in a sandstone sarcophagus too, with a emblem. It was like how do you say it? A shield?
Yes. And so I have corroborating data for that as well later in my slides.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So let's
And
move.
someone had already stolen something very important in this place. It was a ring. That's what I felt. And that's all.
Yeah, so that was good data. It was just nice to see. I think you did a good job there of summarizing it very quickly and efficiently. And then I just need to move things around so I can see colors. And so Jeff as well, I think the smooth surfaces in the granite, that idea that there's no inscriptions, I think is what he's picking up on. And that was good data, I felt.
There was something important. The place was closed with a huge metal round cover that was held by chains.
Yes, I've interpreted that in the analysis because it does match other people's data. And so, yes, I'll show you that as well. But I'm just starting out with the basic physical descriptions. So here we have John's data. You have these rigid layers. You have the grooves along them, and so the trapezoid base. And so I think you're really picking up on these 45-degree angle roofs or ceilings of these structures. So I thought that was really good data, John. And here again, so you have this light slash water slash energy kind of moving down. And I think that actually, to me, it's a good little description for sketching of the target. I thought that was really good. Yeah, if you wanted to say something.
Yeah, it just seemed a lot like, it reminded me of like if there were like fireworks going off inside or outside, or some kind of like real bright white light almost expanding throughout.
Yes.
I guess it's hard to describe it at times, but yeah, it just seemed like it was an explosion of some sort. And I don't really know how it would fit the data, but
yeah, it does.
Yeah, it was an interesting point.
And I think as well, one of the things to take note of is they don't know how the people that built this or stayed there, they don't know how they lit the spaces because there isn't soot on the ceilings, there isn't soot on the walls. So they know that they weren't using torches, but they don't know, they don't have any other information. So it would suggest that they had some mechanism of producing light that was more sophisticated, but that there are no traces of that left. And so then here, just in terms of the basic descriptors, I thought it was interesting, Claudia, where you had this kind of fortress castle-like building in a mountainous area. And again, everyone's picking up on the shapes. And then it changes into a rock with a waterfall. And then finally, it becomes this cave and the cave entrance. And so it's nice to see how the data develops as we work through our sessions. And here we have Jeff, who, at first he's talking about the habitat. It's a shelter, it's man-made. That's great data. And then for him, it progresses as well. And then he ends up landing on this idea of an origin story recorded in stone. And I think that that's really good data in terms of the origin of maybe the people who founded China. And Michael, I think that there was a good little corroboration here with some of your data and some of Jeff's, and we'll see more of that later as well. John, again, you're picking up on that 45-degree angling of the roof, and so that was really nice to see, and these wall-like structures and that idea of like the ridges, and you also have that light here that's shining through, so I thought that was amazing data to see. And here is one of the caves. When you come in, you go down these stairs and you can see just the absolute sheer angle of the ceiling. And it does feel a lot like a pyramid from that angle. And so I think that really does match your data for this pyramid-like shape and this as well with the flat top. And Patrick Flanagan, I kind of got the sense of you were coming towards this as well with some of your data. And then here, so we have Chris and Jeff, who both did a really good job of describing the maze of all these caves. And here you can see this image that's mapping underground and all the caves that are all kind of at weird angles to each other. And yet they do have this connecting line between them. And so the theories are that maybe they were meant to be connected. Some of them aren't anymore. But so I thought that was really good data, both from Chris and Jeff. And it's always nice to see the mirroring of the data that comes through. I do think this shape here and some of these shapes that Chris has here, it's very close match, and that's always fun to see. And Chris, you also, the idea of who is this for? It's not for the elite, it's kind of for everyone. And that is supported by the data because the cave system is enormous. So if you were trying to bring your entire population underground to keep them safe, this is how much space you would need to do it. And so it looks like that might be really good data. Here we have John. I think these representations of the different caves and they're all adjoining and they're underground. I think that's really good. Chris, you had the grid-like pattern. I think that's good data. What I found really interesting was the cup, but we'll talk about that in the next slide. And Jeff also had like tree-like structures and these kind of connected shapes. So I think these are all really good data. Here we see, Patrick, you had this kind of triangular or diamond shaped in the mountains. That's great data. And Jeff mirrors you with that diamond shape as well. And I think, again, you can see that he's drawing the layout of these underground caverns. Michael, for you, it came through as currents of molten incandescent rock. And that actually took me back to, it made me think of that previous slide where they're doing mapping of the underground structures, the caves, and it kind of glows incandescently. So I thought that was good data for that. And you can just see the correlations. So here, Chris and Michael, your data seems very similar, and Patrick and Jeff have that very similar kind of data. So it's just nice to see those corroborations. So here, Chris, you have this cup, this container for liquid right beside this grid surrounded by vegetation. I thought that was amazingly good data because these caves have these water traps around them so that the caves don't get flooded. In the end, they did end up getting flooded over thousands of years, but they were built not to. And so they are like little cups of water in between the caves. And Michael, you really got that in a nice way, various small streams pouring and being collected in small receptacles. So I thought that was a really kind of amusing way for that data to come through. I thought that was really nice.
I want to add something if I could.
Yes, please.
I want to point out to the audience, how amazing it is for them to be able to remote view those maps of those underground tunnels it's extremely useful for operational remote viewing, to be able to, probe the map and area, and to have amazing detail like that is incredible. So just kudos to you guys, because, that's great data.
I agree. That's a really good point. Yes, because when you have that ability, then you can retask to get even more precise. So yeah, definitely for operational target work, this would be fantastic. Yeah, very good. And then here, Patrick, you have that tilted aspect, the 45-degree angle, very good. And Chris as well, you're picking up on not just the angling, but that idea of a vertical structure that's supporting. And so that was good data as well, I thought. Here, I thought this was really interesting. So they have a hexagonal floor to some of the caves. And Michael, you picked up on that honeycomb structure. And right beside that, you had this kind of angular hallway. And Jeff also had the hexagon. So that was just a nice little detail. But it's that level of precision, these really small details that you're getting all the data. It's really nice to see. And then here, John, you had this man-made, has been able to alter the surrounding terrain, that idea of terraforming. And again, I thought that was amazing data, because you're terraforming under the earth in order to have your population go down there and live for an extended amount of time. So I think that's a perfect word to use. And I saw the word in someone else's session as well. I may or may not have it on the slides, but I did see it in someone else's.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I wish I would have. Sometimes I forget to put down my AOLs because you just get in the flow. But kind of remind me. There's like a board game, and it's called Terraforming Mars, and here in the States, and it just reminded me of a lot of the the same colors that you would see, or the same kind of sand or sandstone, like somebody else had mentioned.
Yes. Yeah. Danielle had the sandstone. Yeah. That's fantastic data. And you also had the idea of Noah's Ark, which I think matches really well with Jeff's data about, it was Jeff who had terrarium. But I think that the Noah's Ark, that idea of a shelter for a civilization that's maybe facing some kind of catastrophe, I do think that matches well with the other data that people brought back. So here, I just wanted to show the zigzag. So for Chris, he has that zigzag descending. For Patrick, you have it in the center of this rounded out structure. And you also have this pathway of the zigzagging. Very good. And Michael, you also had it. You had it with a sense of like nighttime stars, but it's good data, and the shape is there. So I thought that was good. And Patrick as well, you have this idea of these cubed, shiny, polished, hollow. So the caves, and that it's tilted. So I thought that was good data. And this is just a close up of those stairs. Chris, you had this kind of shape, and I've seen it in other people's work who've worked this particular target. And it seems as though, because when they first discovered them, the caves were full of water, it was really dark. And so these openings that let the sunlight in, it just seems like light from heaven pouring in. And so I thought that was the motif underlying this image is something I've seen in other people's work on this session. And here you have the waves, the vibrations, the knowledge of physics. And I thought that was a really nice data point, because you can see here, there is no archaeological evidence, and this is from Wikipedia, revealing where the quantity of stone went. No evidence of the work. There's not a single historic document that refers to them, which is highly unusual considering the sheer scale of the project. So again, in order to move almost 1 million cubic meters of stone and not leave any traces behind of what you did with all that stone, you have to have a good understanding of physics. And even the pillars are constructed in a way that they can support the extreme weight of the earth above them. So definitely complex physics there. And you had, again, the shape, the reverberation waves. And John had these tubular-like view or focus and that sense of the ridges on the walls. And Chris had this as well. He had the sandstone as sand rock elements. And he had something here that is behind my creates a lasting memory for all who experience it. I thought that was a really nice little data point there. And so this is just inside one of the connecting tunnels between the caves. And you can just see all the grooves. And so that brings us to the art. So Jeff gives us an art gallery, but he has a sense of fire, and I think that's the orangey light, a robbery maybe, and deception. And I think that the robbery, it could be that the officials that first uncovered the cave, they probably did take some of the artifacts that were there, and then, oh, we didn't find anything at all. And the idea of deception, like I said, China created they did create these art pieces, art carvings on the wall to make it clear that this was something that had to do with China's heritage. So they were sure to put these carvings of their culture, of their people, so that someone else couldn't come and claim that it was maybe related to their tribe, right? So I think that's that deception there. And then it was interesting to see, so some of these carvings, just how it came through. So Claudia, you had the hat with the pom-poms, and some of the hats that the ancient Chinese hats do have these kind of pom-pom things on both sides. So I thought that was kind of funny. And the idea of Venice pops up, and we'll see later how there's all this water that moves through under the caves and around them. And so I thought that was just nice little data. And you have the little crown here. So again, it's this idea of these men with these hats, and that does match the art. And you have this ancient art specifically, and that idea of this helmet-like thing. And I think for me, that brought me back to Chris's fly insect kind of things that were poking out of the head. So I thought that was interesting. Here, Chris's lungs are a shape that really mirrors this instrument that one of these people are carrying. And I saw Michael, it came through as a butterfly, and Jeff just had it at this irregular shape. So that was interesting to see. And then this is just one of the people that you picked up on, Chris. And so I thought it looks to me like it's maybe some of the carvings would match. And here's what Danielle was talking about earlier, the red stone set with a square red stone. And that I thought was really good data for this particular artifact. So this is one of the artifacts that they do acknowledge, and they have it on display. And Claudia, you drew the person in that kind of X shape. You have it again in a different part of your session, and you add the idea that there's red color to it, which matches Danielle's red stone and matches the actual red stone that was found. Chris, this shape I thought was just an inversion of the shape that's in the rock. So I thought that was amazing. So if anyone wants to say anything about that, I thought that was just the level of detail, again, is surprising.
So this stone was found at the site?
In the caves, yes. And it's on display in the caves.
Okay, great.
And I think your data matches it very well.
Yeah, I thought also the spooky guy at the top could be such a Chinese guy with his the dress on. That's what was I thought. They had the white sleeves, you know.
That's right. Yeah, that matches. And so I thought it was good as well. Danielle's, she had that it's a square, that it's red, that it's stone. So I think both of you picked up on the details of that in a really nice way. And Claudia, you also had it has to do with a former civilization. And that's answering my tasking of describe who built the caves. So that was really nice. And here's a little bit more about the breathing, the oxygen. For Jeff, it came through as ventilation. So I thought that was really good. And the idea that it's on autopilot, so you set up the aquifers, you set up the caves, the water moves around them. You do it through the design so that you don't need to install AC units or air filtration technologies. It's just the design itself that does that. So I thought that was good. And then, so we look a little bit, how did they achieve such precision? What's a big mystery to the scientific world? Jeff had this idea of this ocean background. He really picked up on the water element. And then I have here, if I can move this out of the way. Yeah, so again, that idea of the sandstone and layers of sandstone below Earth's surface can serve as aquifers for groundwater. So again, it's the idea of they've created this, they've terraformed it so that it produces what they need: clean water, fresh air, and then some mechanism to light it that we still don't know about. Here's just a little bit of data about the water in and around some of the caves, and the data that you picked up on for that. And Jeff did pick up an excavator on a truck, but I do think that that may be more recent. I think that might be some of the caves. There was some dirt that had fallen in, and so they had to bring that out in order to open the caves to the tourists. So I think that might be related to that. And then here's just some of the outside shots of the caves, interesting kind of structures and angles. Michael, you had this as a wooden hut, but I think it matches the data as stone. And so I still think it's good data. It was just a layer of interpretation. And then here again, we see Jeff mentioning again that he gets a sense of it being a shelter. And Chris, it's about living better, longer, and healthier, filtration, taking, transforming, and releasing, and that you have this process. And this actually kind of works well in the sense of, so it's going through the water, the air, and then into the caves, and then up out the front at the top. So very good. There's some data, I didn't put all of the data that had to do with medical things, but there was some. And here we see Jeff talking about something that's destroying every living thing in its path, that it's a swarm or a wave front. So good intentions gone very wrong. So I think that that was really interesting, mysterious. And someone has just joined us. Let me see. Oh, Danielle is back. Okay, and so you can look do your own research about some of the data. There's a lot of data online that's available because it is such an interesting place. But when we come to how the caves were built, this is where things get really, really interesting, I think, for me especially, because I like this kind of science stuff, where it looks to me that you're describing a Z pinch as a group. And so, Chris, we see here, you have where it all began, that idea of a big bang, structural change, transformation, and you have this shape that matches very well with a Z pinch, which is used to create plasma for fusion energy. And John, you were talking about that explosion, the burst of focused light or energy. It looks to me, based on your data and my own, that something like Z-pinch plasma technology was used. And it makes sense if you think of where did the million cubic, what is it, of stone, the mass amounts of earth and stone that had to be removed to build these caves that they can't find evidence of. It kind of makes sense if they basically applied plasma to them and just melted them down. That would kind of make sense. And so I thought that that was interesting. Jeff's data, he has it as a weapon, but so it becomes a rocket ship. But you can see that even in that rocket ship shape, there is a match to that idea of the Z pinch, and he has that idea of phases and expanding and contracting. So I don't know if anyone wants to say a few words, or I think I have more. Yeah, I'll go through a little bit more, and then we can come back, John, to your explosion of light and white energy, because I do think that ties into that, and Chris as well. And so there are also these magnetic mirrors that have to do with fusion power. So you have the Z pinch that brings us to the idea of plasma and fusion, and then we have these magnetic mirrors that have to do with fusion power as well, and they're interrelated. And I did see some traces in your data, Chris, that I think point to that idea. And Jeff did such a great job of confirming that or corroborating that, because here is a stellarator, which is a plasma device that's related to the magnetic mirrors, and he has it as a galactic burrito, and that you roll it up and that the good stuff's on the inside. And that's just such a funny and amusing but really wonderful description of a stellarator, because the base word is star for stellarator, and it's a plasma device, and so the magnetic fields do end up being wrapped around the plasma, and so it's a great description, and it's a fun one as well. And he also has that idea of the circular energy that expands as it travels outward. And John, you were talking about that sense of expansion outwards, so I think that was really good data that I think gives us some cues to maybe how they did this, how they got rid of all the stone, how they actually created the caves. So here's one of the devices from the late 70s, a high density plasma confinement device that's built inside these magnetic fields. And so Danielle, you had this sense of the vertical movement of a very heavy waffled round metal held by chains. And you can see in the center here, I think that kind of matches your data. So if anyone wants to talk about that.
Wow, it was mostly like a trap on the system, cave systems, but it's weird. Mirror experiment. Wow. No, it was flat. It wasn't that, but it was as big.
Yeah, okay. And any of the other, I wish Jeff were here, but he'll be here for the next live stream, so we might get him to talk about his galactic burrito. I thought that was really good data.
It looks like that, huh? A vertical movement of a waffled round metal held by chains. Yeah, it might be that,
Yeah,
but it was flat.
right. Yeah. So I thought that was just good data. And so, John, here you have this idea of it distributes an energy that can best be described as a mixture of electricity, sound, and light. And these fusion devices, in terms of electricity and light, those are definitely relevant because they are manipulating the electromagnetic field. So the idea that it has a center source and contains two spherical gyro-like mechanisms that generate, maintain a sense of flow that is then relayed to the four cornerstones. First of all, I love the level of detail of your data here. It's fantastic and accurate and precise. And that's really, really good to see that you're probing for that level of information. And I do think it matches very well with these plasma devices that are using these magnetic fields to induce the fusion level of power. So that's why I thought this, where you have these waves that are bright, the idea of a golden sun central to it, and the energy waves moving outwards. And I wonder if that's what caused the ridges. If you wanted to say something about this, I thought that was really amazing.
Yeah, it just it did seem like there was I know that seemed like there was an object that was being used, like we had been talking about inside, and it was giving off this like I'd almost like describe it as like an EMP of some sort, like it's an outward burst, and but yeah, it was rather interesting to see that maybe the sound or electricity had something to do with it.
So I think, seeing all your data together, I think that's what builds the case, right? When you just look at the one, you might be, well, maybe, but when you see it all together and if you do some research into Z pinches, I think you'll be very surprised. I think all of you, because it's really good data. And when you bring it together and it shows, oh yeah, this might be at least some part of the answer, I thought that was really good. And so then finally, There was some other data in here that, Claudia, you saw this disc, the clay disc, and it has maybe hieroglyphs on it. It's unreadable. And Jeff had these rings that had hieroglyphs all around them, tied to a sense of destiny. And I don't know, it made me think it might be tied into the Drupa stones, which were supposedly 12,000-year-old granite discs, so stone discs, and they did have inscribed markings that represent an account of an ET crash landing on Earth. And so that's an interesting story in and of itself, and I know some people have done the Drupa stones as remote viewing targets, so that might be interesting data to put alongside of this. But I think it's something along those lines, maybe. And so I just wanted to add that at the end because you did have that corroboration with Jeff's data. But another way to interpret Jeff's rings with these markings on them, at the entrance of a number of the caves have these symbols carved above the entrances. So he might be kind of referencing that. And the fact that he saw them as rings, Danielle, I think that ties into your rings as well. And so that's all for this. Let me go back to this. So that's the data for today. What did you guys think?
Very interesting. And what's amazing is the corroborating data. As usual, that's really amazing to see that out of nothing, so many people get similar stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And the details that you guys were able to pull, like quite specific in many cases, quite interesting.
It's very sad that they put art on the walls of those structures.
I agree. It's a corruption of the purpose of them to some extent, right? But Chris, you had a lot of corroboration with Jeff. And so I thought that was interesting. I don't know if it has to do with how your minds work or what frequencies you're thinking at. But did you find that interesting?
Yeah. Like I was saying, a lot of corroboration that always amazes me.
Yeah, especially when you're sketching things and the sketches, you kind of feel like it's drawn by the same person. I always think those are amazing. Yeah. And Danielle?
Can you give me more information about this collaboration with Jeff in writing, drawing things you see? How does it work?
So it wasn't an explicit collaboration. Basically, I gave everyone their own target codes, and then I had a different target code that I put to the public. So Chris and Jeff were working, and John, everyone had their own target code, but it was all for the same target. And then the retasks were individualized for some people, but some people I just gave them just tell me more about the people who built it and why they built it. And so Chris and Jeff brought back very like the design of the caves and the mapping of the caves, very, very similar. And John and Patrick had very similar, the circular structure, the motion moving outwards in that circular movement with something in the middle. And so when you're remote viewing, two things I think apply here. First of all, you're accessing this data stream. And so a lot of it is going to be filtered through your experiences and through your cognition and through your cultural references. But the underlying data is the same data. And so when it passes through you very clearly without too much adding on of your own experience, of your own interpretation, that's when you see a lot of these mirroring and correspondences. It's usually a sign that your remote viewers they have good control, that they're not distorting images to fit what maybe makes sense to them in the moment, right? And so in a way, it's kind of not a test of, but it's a marker of remote viewers that are really faithfully transcribing what the data stream is offering them. And even on an unconscious level, right? And then the other thing that applies here is there's a group effect. When you work with a group, you start to have a resonance. And so sometimes you'll start to sometimes the signal line seems a little bit shinier. It's a little bit easier to access the data because the other people in your group are accessing it. And that gives you, I don't know, a little bit of clear access. David, did you want to say something about that maybe? Because I think it's relevant.
In terms of the interconnected correlation between viewers,
Yeah.
I think you covered it pretty well. Is there something specific you wanted me to touch on, or you just wanted me to add more?
Just thought if you wanted to add more.
I thought you did quite well.
I've noticed that before too. So like Patrick, I mentioned before, Patrick and Henny and I have done lots of projects together and over the years, and it's the correlating data. You know, sometimes I'll look at Henny's sessions and in the project, and it's like very similar, and you get, like you said, Sasha, that flow when you're working with groups, and it does show up. It is prevalent.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, Patrick, did you feel that this session?
Yeah. I do think it is a thing. I think working as groups and going back over it. I mean, as John was just saying there, like, I mean, we had many experiences of this. Like we worked together for a long time in a kind of a private group, about 5 of us. It was really good. Like, it was very good. I remember some of the targets that we done at the time. Even yourself, John, you tasked some really interesting ones, and like I always like that because even yourself when you were tasking, like you would always say, look, go back and get more, go back and get more, without saying specifically what to go after. He just knew that you were there, and he knew that if you're getting this, you could get more. And I turned up stuff that I would not have got, I think, without that push. I'm thinking specifically about that Spear of Destiny one that you were in that time. I done a lot of work on that one, and it was only in and bits were coming, and it was at the very very end. I got some, I thought, like, was quite special stuff on that one at the very very end, and that just came from just being pushed. So I think that kind of push factor helps viewers as well. Because it's kind of encouraging, and it gives your unconscious mind takes a while to orient, but it's very very capable of it, and it's very very capable of pulling really detailed data about a target site down. I think you give up long before your unconscious is ready to. So it's just having that kind of patience, and of course you need the time as well. But if you have, if you have that kind of determination as a kind of a tasker to just keep pushing it back onto the viewer and just keep going back, they will deliver the goods.
I agree.
You're muted, Sasha.
Yeah, great job to you all. It's amazing, really. I'm surprised. John, can I ask you a question?
Yeah. I'll try my best to answer or give you it.
The castle that you have drawn, I've searched for this castle too.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know what it was. It was square. It was a square. There was no other. It was a big building, a square. It wasn't mentioned that the caves were near such a building.
Yeah. So I saw there was like a pyramid-like structure, and then almost it seemed like a lighthouse. I think I mentioned that in my summary, like things I had found at the target site, and I think that's what you're talking about there. Yeah, I was trying to do research myself on it, and I didn't find any kind of. I try my best not to data fit sometimes,
Yes.
but yeah, I did see that was trying to show up throughout all of our sessions here and there.
And I think Claudia also had that stone castle, very, very rectangular. And I think part of that is when you're in the cave system and you're living in the cave system, you're essentially in a big rock castle-like fortress.
Oh.
And so I think that it might be that that distortion, right? So we're looking at it and we're seeing caves, and then you're getting these stone fortresses, and you're like, where does that fit? But I think it's just that interpretation of how it was used and what its purpose was, right? So I
Yeah,
think
like that baseline that it was a man-made structure,
Mm.
part of mostly stone, or
Yeah.
and our
Thank you.
subconscious is trying our best to put a label on it, but you have to try to find that baseline.
And one of the things
Thank
I
you.
wanted to say in response to Patrick's comment is, I think I think that's been the case in a lot of the remote viewing methods, is that, they make you start from the bottom and try to piece things together and get more and more complex. Or they describe it as, you have a little aperture and then you have to kind of force it open as you move through your session. Or you're in your normal brainwaves and you have to somehow get your brainwaves to theta by your end of your session so that you can get the good data. But we're really finding that that's just not the case. I think you're seeing in the sessions that I show where people are hitting their first page of the retask, the second page of the retask. They're answering the full question. They're right there at the target. And so I think there's this culture in the remote viewing community that convinces you that you have to go through this long process to get to the good stuff. But I don't think that's the case, and I don't see it in your data. In anyone, I really do see evidence that people can, from the first page, hit the ground running, right? And I think that minimizes the need to do more sessions, do another retask, do another one, because you just, your first session is going to be answering the target, the tasking, and you're going to be providing rich enough details that for me, if I retask you, sometimes it'll be, you've already given me everything I need, but you're interested, you're excited about something, or I'm interested and excited about something. And so either way, either it's for you so that you can explore something further, or it's for me if I'm like, tell me more about this thing. Or in this case where the Z-pinch data, it's like, that is unexpected and it comes through. And there's corroboration across viewers. So let's find out more about what that's all about. And so I think for me, I don't see a retask as, you missed the target, so now I'm going to retask you and try to get you to the target, or you missed a target, so I'm giving you a new session to do. I don't think we need that anymore. I think that remote viewers can be, I think, more and more remote viewers they're good enough that they're not missing the target. And I think sometimes they think they are, and that is, like David was saying, it's due to not having the analysis. So let's say, like in Jeff's case, he did start with, he gave us that sketch of the light shining in, the cave, the underground, the jagged stairs. But let's say he had started with the galactic burrito, and he might be like, what the heck is this? And someone a tasker who's maybe less familiar with different things might look at that and be like, okay, well, that's a total miss. Let's start over. Whereas I see that and I'm like, that's a stellarator. And this is how stellarators work. And they produce fusion and the plasma. And that kind of makes sense because there's no explanation for how the civilization that occupied the caves, how did they build it? What did they do with the stone? How did they light it? What energy source did they use? And so then I can see that's good data. It's not a miss. And so I think that's that idea of kind of re-examining some of the things we take for granted. David, stop me if I'm being too controversial.
Well, yeah, you're on track with the things that we've talked about. The way that I would communicate some of what she's saying in a different context might be that the CRV, again, every methodology has its use. So people have seen me talk about the visuals in HRVG, and they think that I hate CRV. CRV is a model. It has value, but it's a perspective. These are different perspectives. And in science and physics, you can't have one model solve all problems. It doesn't exist. It doesn't work that way, and models are replaced over time. So to think CRV is the ultimate model to me is a complete failure of your thinking. But when I've studied the declassified documentations on it, it's a bit level analysis or data collection process is how they took the approach for CRV. And that was because the mindset was one of proof of the fragments before building, because what they were finding was hey, I'm a little concerned that our viewers are jumping too far, too fast, they're not getting good data. How can we bring it back down to bit level analysis, like simplistic stuff, right? Okay, great. Like that's a certain mindset to prove a certain thing, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that that is useful in other contexts. Like if you're trying to solve a problem, there may be better approaches. Again, it's just like like this is a scientific approach. We have a particular objective. This is what we're after, right? But if you had a completely different objective, it's not about proof. It's about like the precision or the value of the data or things of that nature. That model is going to look probably different. So when Sasha is talking about like the aperture idea, which is what is talked about in the community, part of it is that people are conditioned into this bit level mindset. So they're thinking like, I have to start small and then I have to build bigger. And that's just because of the way that this model that particular model works. And it works, and that's fine. But the other approach is to, if you can open up your mind, like, okay, but what if I don't limit myself that way? Now all of a sudden you start to grab big chunks of complex data. You can do that. And that means your starting point then is much, you know what I mean? You're much faster to get to a more complex endpoint than you would be if you started. It's like starting a race, right? If you start 10 miles in versus at you know, the first mile, your endpoint in terms of the data you collect is going to be much different. So I think part of this process for me is more about the mindset of the community, what the conditioning has been in terms of how you think about it, how you approach it. And if you simply take a sort of a different look and understand through different examples that prove it, that this is possible, then you can start to see a different kind of perspective, a different approach to this stuff. So, and you guys, I think, are proving it. And some of this, of course, is also based on whether you're a beginner or experienced, right? More experienced people have gone through this enough times that it's easy for them to take that leap, where somebody who's a beginner is more likely to maybe mess up because they don't have enough discipline within their mind to collect data at a high volume like that, right? I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying like you can kind of see how that plays in as a factor. So anyways,
Yeah.
I don't really want to lecture people. It's just my particular ideas on this in terms of what Sasha's saying.
And I think one thing,
I,
yeah, go ahead,
oh,
John.
go ahead. Sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, I agree with David. You know, he made a good point because, you know, I that's what I use as CRV. And when I was learning, you know, it was like, you know, some of my mentors through, you know, Lori's module training, it was like, hey, just let it go. You know, it's like, you know, you're holding yourself back because, like David said, you're getting that mindset in these earlier stages that I'm getting these big concepts, and it's like I gotta make them real small that way and put them on paper. But he's correct. Yeah, you know, it's like, and then when you start getting your own flow and adding your own stuff to your own CRV formats, it's like that's when the magic happens. Yes.
Yes, and I wanted to say, John, so in your work and Cody, you're both using CRV and you're both getting amazing data. And what I've noticed about both of you is that you're both, yeah, you're making it your own. You're breaking the rules a little bit. You're bringing in those higher level concepts at the beginning of your sessions. I've seen it in both your work, and I think that's what makes you such good remote viewers, is that you're allowing for that higher complexity data to come in earlier in your CRV session. So you're taking CRV and you're optimizing it, and you're maximizing it and your own potential. And so for me, I have no, you know, I wouldn't say, oh, because you use CRV, you're not as good a viewer. Not at all. You're an amazing viewer. Cody's an amazing viewer, and you're both using CRV. So I think, yeah, so it's not that we have a bias against the data that CRV has produced. But I do think, you, like you said, you have to, you know, when you're learning, it is good to keep little step forward so that the imagination doesn't come in, because that's such a problem for new remote viewers, right? They want to call target, they get all excited. But when you hit a certain level, you know, you trust yourself, you know, you're not making kind of wrong assumptions. So then you can kind of relax some of those rules a little bit. And so I'm always, yeah. And so I do think that for the two CRVers in the group, you guys do amazing work. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So are there any other comments or questions or concerns or just things people want to share before we wrap it up?
Well, there was one thing I saw clearly, a chair I drew a chair, and later when I also was checking out what was be done there in these caves, I saw that there also are cultural events. There was a concert or something like that, and there was one of the photos you showed. There were a lot of chairs, although I made a totally other chair, a very nice chair. These were just stupid white chairs. But anyway, I thought this then, because then you're jumping in time, you know. First you are very much in the old things, and then suddenly in the present when I with regard to the chair. So I wondered about that. Yeah.
And I think someone else had a chair in their data. So if someone did, chime in. But yes, Claudia, I think that that was interesting to see as well, that sometimes the data is coming through and parsing it out for, okay, this is 10,000 years ago, and then this is yesterday, right? That can be a bit challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw that I did not see anything about the energy but the other ones had. So I thought maybe that was not in my retest how it is built, you know. But
That's right. Your retask was to give me more information about the cave entrance that you had drawn. And so I just used that sketch that you had done and asked you to elaborate on that.
yeah, and then it should have been unto me that I should have asked how.
No, I mean, you could have, but when we have a group like this, not everyone has to bring back all the data. And in this case, I thought it was more useful because to see your ability to answer a retasking so precisely, blinded. And so I was like, let's focus on that. And also I felt like because of how you get data, these little downloads, I felt like we could get more about the physical and what was going on inside of them and things like that. And so I wanted to draw more of that information from you, whereas I had the information about the energy from some of the other viewers. And so that's why I give you guys personal retaskings, because sometimes I want to see the corroborations, but then sometimes I want to see what you as an individual are going to bring back. You all have different styles and different interests. And so it's kind of fun to see the different effects and the different kind of data. For an operational team, you don't always want everyone to bring back the same data. You sometimes need, especially if it's a complex project and you don't want to tire out your viewers. So you might say, okay, I want this person to give me the mapping of the area and I want corroboration. So I want this other person to also give me, okay, tell me about the mapping of the area. And then I want someone else to tell me about the people who are there. But I don't want to exhaust my viewers that are doing the mapping. So I'll just focus them on that. And then I'll assign you maybe with the people and what they're doing, right? And so I think that's about project management. And I think as you get to the more complex remote viewing, that becomes something to really think about.
Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because there's, if you don't mind my interruption real quick, is, Lynn Buchanan, he stresses, like recording and keeping a note on your data after each session. That way, you see where your strengths are. And I'm not saying it's impossible to be an overall, like, be able to, describe each just all correctly or all the time. But, like I focus towards man-made. That's more of my specialty rather than, bioorganics or bio-life. It's like as a viewer, most viewers, have specialties on certain things. And the project manager, as Sasha said, will at times, focus on and give different retaskings or on specific aspects of the target. So that way they can optimize their data.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about thinking like, oh, this viewer is weaker on this, so I won't retask them with that. It's not that at all. It's saying this viewer is really strong on this. And so I'm going to get right. So like John, very strong on mapping out, showing me, okay, this is the target. This is what, there's a mountain here, right? And so then if I know that, then I know, okay, so then that's what I would retask him with, because I know he'll give me that kind of data really, really well. And yeah, and it's the same. Like I think David, when you were tasking for the Special 5, you would give me slightly different things than maybe Henny for retaskings because we had different strengths. I think that's a good thing, right? Because then you get more data.
Yeah, and this is the power of what she's showing through the retasking, because it can be done at the start, and you can assign each person a different focal point to get a more broader and in-depth, broad and in-depth summation of the target. And so the point is, like, we talk about stuff that we already know personally, we've seen firsthand, but this is what she's showing you here to the community is some form of proof or evidence that this is real, that we're not just making this up, right? And she's showing that through this retasking process, because it can be applied a bunch of different ways. And this is what I said before about being very strategic. Like, the community in general, in my opinion, needs to achieve much higher levels of strategic precision. And this is more of what, at least I mean, Sasha is too, but I'm really focused more on that mindset. And so this is just sort of a little piece of information and proof of concept that this is important, it does work, and to consider how you can apply it.
And so, if no one has anything else, I think we might wrap up.
I just wanted to add that the dating of the caves, 4,500 years ago, these correspond to Immanuel Velikovsky's book, Worlds in Collision, and there would have been breathing, good air problems, safe water, and shelters to be found. So many tribes, Hopis have built in mountains. It was to hide from the elements that were, everything was falling down from a comet. So they had to hide to find a shelter. So I think these caves, Chinese caves, are related to that. And probably our civilizations keep being destroyed and rebuilt.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Mm.
So I want to thank everyone for participating. You all did well, as always. You got great data. It was just fun to see and to explore. And so I thank you very much for your great work. And we will be meeting in 2 weeks, because I had assigned 2 targets for this live stream. But we're only doing 1 today, and we'll do the next one in 2 weeks. So we will see you all there at a different time, but probably on a Saturday or Sunday. So good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Sasha. Thanks, David.
Bye.
Cheers.